Today we're going to talk about building stronger teams. And while there are many aspects to building a strong team, we're going to talk about two today, which is number one, stages of a team development and how they come together. And number two is how do we build the foundation of trust. Several years ago, Tuckman came up with a very intuitive model on how groups move through the phases of group development. And so before we ever start a project, an assignment, a long-term goal that we're all aspiring to, we have to start with forming. And when teams come together or individuals come together to form a team, they may or may not have a whole lot of familiarity with one another to begin with, while other teams have really had this opportunity where there's been years of mutual learning from one another over the course of time that has helped them maybe gel and move quicker to the goal that they're aspiring to achieve. So Tuckman started with this group has a forming piece to it where we all come together. While we all come together, we may not have the same vision, the same way of operating, and we may not have good familiarity with one another. So Tuckman suggested that we move into this phase where we go through storming. And sometimes storming happens quickly, and some teams never get out of the phase of storming. So this is really getting to know one another, being clear about what our shared objectives are, what's our vision for accomplishing a particular task or a goal. And so storming is really that moment where we all get to know one another, and sometimes it can get a little bit muddy, and it certainly creates an opportunity for conflict to arise within a team. But once they move through that and they have some of that tension that sometimes leads to a shared vision, a shared common set of goals that we're all moving towards, then we start to have norming. And at norming, we start to move towards having similar aspirations. We start to understand one another a little bit better. So there's not this ambiguity or this curiosity about how one person is going to work with the other. And when we start doing that at a high level and we enhance our level of norming, we move to performing. And so within higher performing teams, you see where they seem to know how to finish one another's sentences. They work together with a shared idea of what your strengths and weaknesses are and how we fill in each other's gaps. And a high-performing team may go on to achieve great success. You may think of any sports team where you've noticed that some don't perform very well at all, and it seems like they never just seem to get together and gel as a team, and their outcomes are not anywhere near what they may have aspired to accomplish when they started off as a team together. Whereas you have other teams that go on and they continue to just seem to gain momentum, and they're more successful based on their performance together, learning from one another, and by the end of the season, they found themselves pursuing some sort of a championship or some achievement that they really aspired to from day one. Be mindful, though, that whether it's a project team that you're on within your career or your organization, or it is a sports team or any other type of team in a group setting, when that goal is over or that journey is finished, that team has to adjourn. And while members of that team may go on to do other stuff together at some other time, they'll have to go right back through this Tuckman cycle of forming, storming, norming, and performing before they're able to really move forward. So with every team, with every journey, there comes an end, and that team has to start over if they're going to get the opportunity to assemble together. So let's talk about what is important in group development, and that is the element of trust. And there are many definitions of trust. It's been something that has been widely studied, but I'm going to really focus on one by three scholars, Mayer, Schuerman, and Davis, who came up with a very good definition of organizational trust. And it goes like this: the willingness to be vulnerable to the actions of another. The willingness to be vulnerable to the actions of another. Think about what is required of the person who is going to trust someone to that extent to where they're going to be vulnerable. And it can be a small task like, hey, can you come and pick me up at the airport, all the way to, hey, I'm entrusting you to be my executor of my estate. And so there's a wide breadth there of where trust comes into play, and whether or not you're going to be vulnerable to the actions of another is really going to establish whether you're going to be a great team, or are we always going to have this measuring of trust where it leads to tension, and we're always looking for whether or not you can trust somebody, and it leads to skepticism and sometimes erodes the performance of the team. Well, these three folks really had three elements that were fundamental to building up this definition of trust. The first one is integrity. does the person that I want to have trust or I'm going to be vulnerable to have some principle about them that I find trustworthy or not? And so you may think about this as a mentor or a parent or a close friend. Is there some element about the way they show up that you really find principled in a way that that leads to some integrity, that you feel really comfortable about what they offer to you as someone that's going to trust them? Secondly is the ability. We may know people that we find don't have necessarily the ability to be trusted. Maybe you have untold amounts of emails that you've sent to them. They haven't responded. Maybe they never return your phone call, or maybe they say they're going to do something and they never show up to do that. And so that may demonstrate to you that they don't have the ability to be trusted. Whereas you may have friends who you're like, I have implicit trust in this person because they always show up and do what they say they're going to do. And then last but not least is benevolence. Does the person that I'm trusting want good for me? We find ourselves not necessarily spending a lot of time with people who don't want good for us. So we're really more inclined to gravitate to people who may really want some great outcome for me, and they're a partner in my success. So Mayor Schuerman and Davis really suggested for me to be vulnerable to another person, I need to have and find integrity, ability, and benevolence within the person that I want to trust. So these are three elements that are really help you as a team come together and expedite or move quickly through that whole forming, storming, norming, and performing element.